This is BYU Sports Nation, brought to you by the BYU Store, simulcast on BYU TV and BYU Radio. Now, from Studio B, here's Spencer Linton and Jarom Jordan.
BYU Sports Nation is live, your day-to-day play-by-play, back in Studio B, presented by the BYU Store, official outfitter of BYU fans everywhere. Wednesday, August 11th, wherever and however you're connected, great to have you with us. Once again, I am Spencer Linton, and that, my friends, is a man who is also known as a yearbook photo correspondent, Jarom Jordan.
So, Jamal Williams took his headshot at some point previous to yesterday. It was posted online, and it is awesome. For the radio audience, you're going to have to go to social media and check it out. He just pure joy. Just Jamal Williams with the Detroit Lions, just pure joy. So I thought that it'd be fun, and we as a show thought it'd be fun if, and it's our question challenge of the day, send in your best Jamal Williams headshot face. So let's try and reenact this ourselves.
Okay.
I'll go first. This is going to be great radio here for a second. Okay.
Wow. Okay.
All right. Here's my Jamal Williams.
You're going to attempt a J-Swag Daddy.
Okay, your turn.
Okay. The mouth has to be open a little bit.
Nice. Again, that's great radio. It's just amazing radio. For the TV audience, you can see it, but
you look at that guy. You look at that guy, and it creates joy. Not many people can do that, but you take one glance at him, and you feel joy.
Yes,
I love that.
He's just a fun dude, right?
Yes,
so awesome.
Okay, our challenge of the day: send in your best Jamal Williams selfie replication, yearbook photo, whatever you want to call it. I love it.
Now, listen. We've had some. They're mostly children. We would like adults as well to weigh in here. Give us your best impersonation. Let's go.
Come on. Your inner juvenile hijinks.
It's like
something we do on a daily basis.
It's mostly kids. Granted, they look very cute. Don't get me wrong. But, we want some adults. Let's go.
All right. Along with the selfies that are incoming, here is the rest of today's show lineup. Something that I certainly didn't smile about yesterday.
Nice shirt, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Is longtime national sports talk host Colin Cowherd right in his critical analysis of former BYU quarterback Zach Wilson?
I wonder what we're going to say.
Well, I feel like we are justified in how we feel. The elite Mitch Matthews will size up the race to replace Zach Wilson at BYU quarterback and tell us
what did you just say?
Who the Hail Mary target should be for the Cougars this season.
You got to ID that guy before the season. Although in 2015, BYU had 2.
Plus, our 10-10 continues. The top 10 pass catchers that BYU's defense will face in 2021. Here are today's BYU Sports Nation headlines.
Well, camp practice 6 is today. The NCAA changed its rule earlier this year regarding the acclimation period. It's increased from 5 practices to 7, meaning full pads could be used tomorrow. So I was inaccurate and uninformed yesterday. I am now informed. Earlier this week, head coach Kalani Sitake said the Cougars are working on developing depth.
We feel like we have more than 11 starters on each side of the ball. And if we can get 123 of them, that'd be great. But right now, we're trying to get as many as possible and seeing what type of packages and personnel groups we can put together.
There's media availability today, so follow BYUSN, BYU TV Sports on social media for post-practice interviews and highlights.
Kirsten Fotu of BYU Women's Golf wins the 2021 Siegfried and Jensen Utah Women's Open Championship with a 2-day total score of 7 under par, taking a 1-stroke victory. Congratulations.
It's awesome. 15th ranked women's soccer team plays its blue and white scrimmage last night. The blue team defeated the white team. Goals were scored by Olivia Wade, Brecken Mozingo, and Abby Cotter. Cougars host Weber State in an exhibition Saturday night, 9 Eastern, on BYU TV and the app. The first game broadcast of the season.
Number 15 team in the country. Let's go. Yoli Childs and the Los Angeles Lakers Summer League team face the New York Knickerbockers tonight in Las Vegas at 8 p.m. Mountain. Do they still call them the Knickerbockers? Is that a thing, or has that entirely gone away?
I don't know. That's a good question. Let's ask Zach Wilson. He lives in the area.
He knows the New York area now a little bit.
He's an Islanders fan. We know that.
He's chugging water at Islanders games.
Yes, he is, unlike Johnny Manziel. More on that in a moment. Cougars in the minors. In AA, Jackson Clough had a hit for the Harrisburg Senators in a 6-5 loss to the New Hampshire Fisher Cats. In AAA, Colton Shaver went 1 for 4 with a solo dinger with the Sugarland Skeeters in an 8-7 loss to the Round Rock Express.
From BYU men's golf, David Timmons currently tied for 117th, 6 over par at the United States Amateur Championship. Timmons tees off today, 6:35 p.m. Eastern. His teammate at BYU, Carson Lundell, 12 over par, tied for 233rd.
Do you say amateur because it's golf? Do you say
Yes.
say amateur?
Correct.
Outside of golf?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Within the golf community. It's
Amateur.
weird, right? Like, I don't know why that is.
If someone actually is mature, they say mature. It feels like.
That's a
I'm like, well,
Steve
I say
Cleveland
mature
thing.
because I'm not mature.
He's very mature. Okay.
The NCAA. I'm like, NCAA?
No, you ask
Everyone has their preference.
a great question.
Tomato,
Within the
tomato.
golf community,
Amateur.
It feels like amateur, but maybe we should call it the amateur championship.
This is not great content. I apologize.
All rise and shout for the great content. It's time for What's Trending.
We're talking about it, and so are we. It's What's Trending on BYU Sports Nation.
The press is wrong, Colin. Colin Cowherd, longtime national sports talk radio host and personality, said yesterday, doubling down on his critique of Zach Wilson, and I quote, "Zach Wilson reminds me a little too much of Johnny Manziel. Small, cocky, and comes from wealth." Okay? Keep in mind, this happens after Mr. Cowherd said last fall about Zach Wilson, quote, "He's a very clever player. Got the height, got the arm, moves around a lot. If you watch him play, you look at him, and you're like, that works somewhere. I've watched him play for a couple of years, and my takeaway is he does a lot of these clever things. He's got a little point guard in him. He looks like an NFL quarterback to me." End quote. Okay, Jarom, my first question, which we will get to, is what changed between last fall and yesterday to make Colin Cowherd flip-flop,
That's a question for Colin.
right? The question for you is, in that critical critique, small, cocky, comes from wealth, reminds me a little bit too much of Johnny Manziel, is there any part about that where Colin Cowherd is right on Zach Wilson?
Yeah, he comes from wealth. But that doesn't. That's a fact. That's not an opinion. Okay.
Why is that considered a
Why does
negative
that matter?
thing?
Why does that matter? Do we think every successful quarterback came from poverty? Why does that matter?
Did Tom Brady
can't
and
have
Peyton Manning come from poverty?
I'm pretty sure Peyton Manning came from wealth. Dad played in the NFL?
Right,
Yeah.
but Colin Cowherd argued yesterday, stop making the comparison of Zach Wilson to Peyton Manning in terms of wealth.
Who's making that comparison?
Well, people were saying like, hey, Peyton Manning was successful. He came from wealth, so why is that a negative thing?
Well,
it was 25 years ago. Stop making that comparison.
Yeah, well, let's look at what he said. So small. Is he small? No, he's 6'3", 209.
He's 3 inches taller than Johnny Manziel.
He's the same weight, 3 inches taller.
He's 3 inches taller than Johnny Manziel. And again, last fall, he said he's got the height. Those are Colin Cowherd's words.
Yeah.
He's got the height.
He forgot. So full disclosure, I used to love Colin more than I love Colin. I think he's great. I think he's off base on some stuff now. I think he's clickbaity a little more than he used to, first takey, if you will.
Okay.
I used to listen religiously. In fact, I used to listen as a teenager in Portland when he was a local guy in Portland.
Yes.
Okay. So my history with Colin goes way back. I like Colin. I think
Yes.
he's very smart. I think he's really good at his job.
Clearly,
I just
he's
think
talented.
Right. Yeah. Listen, like most people, you're going to be off sometimes. He's off on this one. He's not small, okay? Cocky. Based on what? The headband? Is that what we're basing that information off of?
And
Is that what it is?
When does it become?
How do we know this?
When does it become cocky and not just confidence?
Also, by the way, do you know who the cockiest quarterback in BYU history was? Jim
McMahon.
I think he's the number one quarterback in BYU history. I don't care if a guy's cocky. I don't. Because if they deliver, it doesn't matter to me.
What's the difference between swaggy and confident and cocky? Because I feel like cocky is a mixture of confidence and swag.
If you listen to Zach talk, that's not the vibe you get.
No.
You get like great teammate, hard worker.
That's
like
why I
the
want
vibe.
Colin Cowherd to have Zach Wilson on his show. Invite him on the show. Talk to him.
Yeah.
And then tell me that you still think, it reminds me a little too much of Johnny Manziel. He's cocky.
Johnny had off the field issues with partying, obviously.
Yes, way deeper things. He had
Listen,
addictions, for crying out loud.
Yes, and people have issues, and I don't want to make light of said issues, right? Of
course not.
Johnny liked to party, liked to have a good time. Zach went to BYU, okay? It doesn't matter what level of Mormon you are or if you are Mormon at BYU. It doesn't matter. But this place is unique. This place is unique. And Zach Zach Wilson chugged water while on screen at an Islanders game.
He was made fun of for that.
Zach Wilson could, if he wanted, drink beer right now, and it doesn't matter. He's not at BYU. It doesn't matter, right? It's not against an honor code that he doesn't need to live by if he doesn't want to right now. Yet he chugged water. That's the difference with Johnny Manziel right there. And then the wealth thing. Again, what does that have to do with anything? So what? Zach Wilson, if Zach Wilson was entitled, why would he sign up to go to a school that just went 4-9? Why would he not transfer after not getting the job? Why would Zach Wilson we got to know Zach at a higher level after he left BYU than when he was at BYU because we got to talk to him every week.
And that's why I feel strongly about this. That's why I want to go on record and say, Colin, talk to him. Spend 30 minutes with him or even 10 minutes with Zach Wilson and tell me you don't feel differently about the comparison to, he reminds me a little bit too much of Johnny Manziel.
Those comparisons happened early in Zach's career just because literally he would flush out of the pocket and make a throw on the run.
Make
that was
a play.
Pretty accurate. That's it. That's the comparison. And they're both white. I don't know what else the comparison would be. Zach's not small. Sure, he's cocky based on the headband. I don't think he's actually cocky. I think when Zach came out of Corner Canyon, maybe the perception was that. But he was crazy hard worker. It's okay for Colin to make whatever takes he wants. He's a national host. He's not going to get deep. He's going to be surface level, and he's going to incite a reaction. That's his job. He did it. It's successful. We're talking about it right now.
Here's the reality. I feel like it is more about an issue that Colin Cowherd or a calculated move by Colin Cowherd to go after the New York Jets and the Jets fan base because he knows they will engage.
Yeah,
and he knows BYU's fan base will engage.
We're playing into that right now.
Here we are.
Yeah.
But when he says small, cocky, and comes from wealth with the negative connotation and then makes the comparison to Johnny Manziel, my first reaction was, I cannot think of two more different people on the quarterback spectrum than Zach Wilson and Johnny Manziel from a personality and just life-standing standpoint. So I responded, okay, Colin, except Zach is punctual, accountable, disciplined in his quarterback craft, driven, responsible, teachable, doesn't party, and handles criticism with class. And I could have kept going. His work ethic is something that is special. And we've talked about this several occasions with all of Zach's coaches. We've heard it from Robert Saleh, his new head coach. We've talked about it at length with Steve Young. Zach Wilson is a unique character. He is in the details, very in the moment of the details. He's a nerd when it comes to football study. Johnny Manziel was not that guy. And again, those are deeper seated issues. We're talking about addictions and stuff like that. That's tough to overcome. That's why I have a hard time with this comparison because Zach's coming from an entirely different backdrop.
Yeah, and
it's not close.
I'm guessing that Colin's not talking about off the field per se. He's just talking on the field with Johnny.
Okay, well, again,
That's
even if it were on the field, hey, he's 3 inches taller than Johnny Manziel, and in Colin Cowherd's mind and in his words, he said, he's got the height and he's got the arm.
Yeah, and Johnny was a more successful collegiate athlete than Zach. He won the Heisman.
Would Colin Cowherd say this about Zach Wilson if the 49ers drafted Zach Wilson?
Probably not.
No!
Full disclosure with Colin, too, I think he has a place in Park City. He at least visits regularly.
He loves Utah.
He went to the 2019 USC and Washington games.
Okay.
He went to those games and in person.
Again, it's easy for us to go after him without Colin Cowherd here, but Colin did say, I'm rooting for Zach. It doesn't feel like that.
Well, he's a national talk show host. We shouldn't get too burned up over this because he's there to incite a reaction.
And he did.
Success. And guess what? He's at Fox. He's not at ESPN. First Take, yes, they're trying to do that. Fox, they lean that way a little more in the incite.
Okay, this is the Johnny Manziel that was invited to a Peyton Manning summer camp it featured all of the Mannings, and he didn't show up to the clinic for these high schoolers that had paid a bunch of money to come and work with the Mannings. He just didn't show up, and that was not a one-off. There were issues there. So Zach is where he needs to be, when he needs to be, doing what he needs to be doing as far as football goes.
I just wish that was in San Francisco, not in New York.
Okay, and I think that's what this is about. If Zach Wilson got drafted by the 49ers, we would not be having this conversation, not even for a second.
Yeah, to me, this conversation isn't necessarily even about Zach Wilson.
It's about the Jets.
It's about Colin Cowherd and what a national TV and radio host does.
Okay. So and
in our super biased opinion, of course, we love Zach.
Yeah, a few people were like, a classic BYU guy coming to defense of his BYU quarterback. Yeah.
What are we going to throw our guy under the bus? Why would we do that?
We talked to him every week after the season leading up to the draft.
That was fun.
Every week for like a month after the draft. So, yeah, we were very close with Zach Wilson. And I'm not okay with that comparison.
You feel like it's a character defamation of sorts. Although it's not technically that, right?
Yes.
Again, national host. He's getting a reaction. We're playing into that. It's all good. It's all good. It's all good.
Hey, Colin said he looks like an NFL quarterback to me. He is an NFL quarterback for the Jets.
Absolutely.
Number 2 overall pick, an historical pick out of BYU football.
Well, one could argue sometimes that the Jets quarterback isn't an NFL quarterback, but in this case he is.
Hey, you tell us. You can sound off on that as well. Hashtag BYUSN. Do you think Colin Cowherd is right? Also, let's bring the joy back into this.
Where Colin was right, where Colin was wrong.
Send us your Jamal Williams replicated yearbook photos. We want to see more of these.
Love it.
Hashtag BYUSN.
Okay, coming up, a new jersey mock-up worse than BYU's late 90s bibs. Believe it.
Is this a real thing? We'll dive into that. Plus, Mitch Matthews brings his elite swag back to BYU Sports Nation. Who's the Hail Mary pass catcher at BYU in 2021? This is BYU Sports Nation.
One thing Mountain America has learned over nearly a century of helping members achieve their financial dreams is that we are stronger together. We achieve great things together. And while we are still here to serve you, we know together feels different right now. It might take some time, but we're looking forward to the day when we can gather together again. We're still here, guiding you forward.
Introducing the all-new 2021 Nissan Rogue. A fuel-efficient car that's compact enough to park just about anywhere, but has enough cargo space to fit your hobbies, your kids' hobbies, and your dog's hobbies. It's equipped with the latest safety and efficiency technology for a smooth and quiet ride wherever you want to go, whether it's through the neighborhood or across the country. Are you ready to Rogue? It's at Tim Daly Nissan Southtown.
I am a tone-deaf monkey. You're the man. You're the man. You're confident. You're not insecure. It's just an audience full of people that are going to judge you. All right. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Wait, why am I doing this? I'm not even singing in the show tonight. Oh, I want to ride into the sun. I want to step into a dream with you. I want to ride into the hell. Boom, boom, boom.
BYU Sports Nation is presented by the BYU Store, official outfitter of BYU fans everywhere.
Saturday night, watch the 15th-ranked BYU women's soccer team host Weber State in an exhibition match to get ready for the season. 9 Eastern on BYU TV and the app.
We are live in Studio B with your day-to-day BYU Sports play-by-play. I'm Spencer Linton. That is Jarom Jordan. He was recently featured on an episode of the Deep Blue podcast and joins us now on BYUSN. My friend, the elite, Mitch Matthews.
There it is.
Hey, baby.
There it is.
How we doing?
Hey, we're good, man.
How we doing?
It's been a minute. What's going on? Fatherhood is now well advanced. You're still running your business, staying involved in the analysis of football. How's life?
Life is great. Yeah, baby's 9 months old now, or just about to be 9 months old. Like I said before, her last shout out on this station was when I was an analyst at my last game, and she was about a week old. So She's great, 9 months old now. Business is great. Family is great. My wife actually has a alumni soccer game. It's alumni versus the current players tonight, and I'll be going to that. So you'll see me around on campus if you're around.
Okay.
Nice.
Now, when is the alumni BYU football game, Mitch, that you certainly would compete in?
Hey, you know what? Let's let this be the genesis of that idea coming to life. So let's start this now. Let's get this thing going because I'm ready. I'm trained and I'm ready.
Well, yeah, you still train, and not everyone else does. Flag football. Isn't there a flag football game with the alums every year or something?
There was going to be this year. I don't think there has been every year, but there was going to be one this like about 6 months ago, but COVID had to cancel it. So hopefully they try to get and we do it again. But there were some good names in there.
Okay, so while you train for that, now we all sit back and watch BYU football get ready for the 2021 season with offensive coordinator Aaron Roderick. Coming off a remarkable year with Zach Wilson and company. Obviously, Zach Wilson has graduated and moved on, but the wide receiver core, we feel, is one of the deeper, if not the deepest, position groups on the team. So my question for you, Mitch, is which skill position group are you depending on the most at this point? Is it the pass catchers, or with a new quarterback, are you leaning heavily on the running backs?
You know, you're asking someone who's going to be very biased towards one specific group, and that would be receivers. However, though, as deep as the receiver group is, there is so much talk and so much probably anxiety in the receiver room on who's going to start, who's going to get the ball more, who are these two new brothers, who are these new guys, these young guys. And so the most consistent groups that we have, the guys that are returning and have had fantastic years, are the tight ends and are the running backs. So I'm actually not saying the receivers are necessarily the go-to group. However, can they become that after game 2 or 3 or 4? Absolutely. I think they're the deepest receiver group that BYU has seen in the last 20 years. And before 20 years, I don't even know BYU before then. So I'm just saying in my lifetime, they're the deepest that I've seen. But the running backs are super stout and they have a lot of talent there. But my favorite group right now to watch for is probably the tight ends, because they come off a fantastic year with Isaac Rex last year. Wish we would have had more Matt Bushman, but with Dallin Holker coming back off his mission, I've actually trained with him at our gym here a couple of times, and he looks unbelievable. He looks NFL ready. He's big, he's fast, he's strong. So I'm really excited to see how those guys do. And they all have great experience, just like the running backs. And I can't wait to see the receivers emerge and show off their depth.
It's pretty awesome because a lot of guys returned, obviously, right? A lot of guys left for the NFL, notably Dax Milne. But because of COVID, you get a lot of dudes that are here. And on BYU's roster right now, there's 3 seniors listed because last year essentially was a free year for everybody. So that's gnarly. Okay, let's talk about the receivers. What do you think of this group? And you mentioned super deep. Who do you like? What do you like about them?
I mean, I think Gunnar Romney is super, super consistent. He's very athletic too. I really like him. I like how he plays. But Neil Powell, I've seen a bunch of him too. He has probably the most upside out of all the receivers. I think he's got to string a little bit of it together. I think he's got to be more consistent. I think he's got to play a little bit more like a senior, like someone who wants to go play in the NFL. But that guy has a lot of upside. I'm really, really excited to watch him, Neil Powell, and Gunnar Romney lead this team. But then these two new guys, these brothers, I'm very biased towards them as well because I play with Kainaku, with their older brother, and I know that bloodline is strong and as athletic as ever. So this group is very deep, very talented, and very strong. And there's probably a lot of healthy anxiety in that receiver room. Everyone looking around who's playing better than the other. And they're probably all raising their level of play because of all the talent in that one room.
Yeah, it's super exciting. Regarding Gunnar Romney, after a game last year, Spencer, in all his wisdom, called him the best receiver between the twos in the country because he's having a hard time just getting into the end zone right there, right? He's making these crazy catches. He's landing like at the 2 or the 1, including in practice the other day. As a guy who's 5th in BYU history in receiving touchdowns, what advice would you give to Gunnar Romney about getting in the end zone?
Long arms, just like me. Big hands, long arms. You have that reach. If you're at the 2-yard line, man, you just got to lean in and reach. I mean, honestly, I think that's one of those things that's going to haunt him. There's no such thing as like a 2-yard line or 1-yard line ability that someone has to get in the end zone. I think he's got plenty of a nose for the end zone. I think Those things, though, landing at the 2-yard line, the 1-yard line, are so not fun to be right there, that I think this year he'll make certain that these things can't be said about him again, right? He's going to make sure he's in the end zone, and that Katoa and that Algier, they don't get that 1-yard touchdown and take all the credit for his work. So I'm guessing right now, and I know right now, he's thinking these things and saying, forget this, I'm going to have 5 or 6 more touchdowns by just leaning in and sticking in the end zone.
Former BYU standout wide receiver Mitch Matthews with us on BYU Sports Nation. You mentioned that Neil Pau'u has the most upside. I'd like to explore that a little bit more in detail. Why do you feel like Neil Pau'u is the guy that has the most room to grow and to take over as that leader?
I wish I knew him more on a personal level. I played with his older brother, Butch, but they're a very, very athletic family. He has a lot of plays that, as a former player, he has this pop and this X factor about him that just makes you go bug-eyed and shake your head like, how did that just happen? How did he just do that? How did a guy as big as him make that move? And is that shifty? And it draws you in to say, what else can this guy do? And so I think he's that X factor for BYU, but he's shown some inconsistencies, and maybe it's because he's played behind Dax Milne and Gunnar Romney, and he hasn't been like that consistent starter. I think if he's put as that consistent starter with Dax being gone, it'll force him to level up, play smart, and play consistent. And he has that factor about him that as a former player, you watch, you say, okay, this guy's got that it factor. It's hard to explain, but he's got that it factor about him. And I can't wait to see him put it all together. And if he does, he could be really, really special. I really believe that.
I was told at practice 2 days ago by someone who matters, he is playing the best of all the receivers right now. So that plays into kind of what you're saying right there. Okay, regarding a bunch of receivers who want the ball. Receivers at times can be needy, right? How do you keep all these guys happy, Mitch?
The honest truth is you can't. I mean, even I was with Cody Hoffman 2 days ago. We were playing some golf. And even him was like, man, I wish this year I would have got the ball more. I'm like, man, you had a 100 catch season. What are you talking about? Right? And same thing for me. Like I had a 73 catch season, and even I'm like, man, I wish I would have been here and then this would have happened here. And you talk to any receiver, they're going to say the exact same thing. So every receiver wants the ball more, but that's a very good thing. As long as there's great camaraderie in the receiver room, it's okay to want the ball more because you're competitive. You want to put the team on your back at times. You want that game-winning Hail Mary type situation to be on you. You want that 3rd and long situation to be on your shoulders. And I think that shows confidence. So it's okay if every receiver has that. But what has to happen is they're going to have to quickly find out who their most consistent receivers are. Because even if someone has a lot more upside, that doesn't mean you're a starter. That doesn't mean you're the go-to receiver. It doesn't even mean you're the number one receiver just because you have more upside and have all these X factors and you're the it guy, or even if you performed well in camp. It's all about who's doing the best starting game one. So the consistent receivers after fall camp is over, those will be the starters because all 5 of those top guys, they have enough talent to play at this level and potentially even the next level. It's all about who's the most consistent and who makes the quarterback feel most comfortable. Because I guarantee you the offensive coordinator is going to whoever is going to start at QB and says, which receivers make you feel most comfortable? Those receivers are going to be the ones that are most likely to start, I promise you.
I'm so excited to ask you this next question because you speak from a well of memorable experience in Lincoln, Nebraska specifically. Who is the wide receiver at BYU in 2021 that should be on the end of a Hail Mary attempt if and when that needs to happen?
Oh, that is tough. I'm going to have to give that one because I know him and I've seen him the most. He's extremely consistent. I have to give that one to, well, is it receivers alone or is this all position groups?
Anybody. Let's say anybody.
Any pass catcher.
Oh, I'm going Isaac Rex on that one. That one. And I'd say a close second would be Gunnar Romney if I had to go with the receiver group. But I would say those two, great playmakers, sure hands. But Isaac Rex has an absolute nose for the end zone, and he catches everything in there. So I would have to go with him.
12 TDs last year. I mean, that's tied for 5th in BYU history. That was amazing. Okay, at quarterback, obviously that's a big storyline. It sounds like it's going to be a couple weeks before they name one. Kalani Sitake came on the show 2 weeks ago and basically said, or last week, and said, when we name it, we'll tell everybody. Well, the fans need to know too. So who do you think is going to be the guy at quarterback against Arizona?
It's a tough one. I mean, because both of them have had enough tape and have had enough games to show that they're worthy of playing, right? Both of them have started games. Both of them have won big games. Both of them have played big. I think the guy that's going to give the most comfort to the coaches is the dual threat, Jaron Hall. I just, off the bat, I just think that is, even where football is moving as a whole, like the trend of football, a dual threat quarterback is becoming more popular again, right? And so I think to give the most comfort to the coaches, they're going to go with a guy that can get things done with his arm and with his legs. So I'm on the Mr. Hall train. That's not necessarily who I'm voting for. I mean, hoping he's a great guy. I love him. But I think his ability to, as a dual threat, gives the coaches the most comfort to start off the season. Now, if he doesn't perform really well the first 3 games, I think it'll be a quick ripcord, to be honest with you, because the backup, the second in command, Romney, I think he can come in and has shown enough to be a starter as well. So it's actually a good position to be in as for the coaches at BYU, because they have 2 great quarterback options, 2 experienced guys. But I think the guy that gives them the most comfort and the most confidence is the guy that can get it done with his legs and his arm.
Mitch Matthews on BYU Sports Nation. Okay, Mitch. While we have quarterbacks on the mind, I can't remember if you specifically ever went through a quarterback battle while you were at BYU in camp, because I feel like Taysom Hill was the guy for the majority of the time. So in your freshman year, if there was a quarterback battle or some instance of it, what does that do for a team? Does it help? Does it hurt? How does it impact them in camp?
I don't think it helps, honestly. I don't think it helps because everyone wants to know, even the players want to know, and they might have an idea of who it's going to be, but if they're not for sure, then you really aren't building around this person early enough. You don't want it to be a 50-50 battle, coming to the first game of the year. You want the starter to be there from spring ball and the summer workouts, and you want him to be the captain and leading the team for a long, long time and have that experience. So I don't necessarily know if it's healthy. It's probably healthier for other position groups to see who's going to emerge. But it's, in my opinion, having a position group battle at quarterback this late and not even knowing until a few weeks before the first game, I don't think is a plus or a perk. And you're right, Taysom Hill was always a starting quarterback with me when I was there. But I always had a switcheroo. I had Riley to James Lark, I had Taysom to Christian Stewart, and then Taysom to Tanner Mangum. So I had, I think, 5 different QBs in my career. So I know what inconsistency in terms of who's going to be the quarterback. I've had that before. I had all great quarterbacks, but having a fall camp battle of QB, I never experienced. But I know that they would rather have a lock-in starter 9 months before then, so they can build around that person, change the offense around what style of quarterback that person is. So it's not a bad thing, but I definitely can't say it's a good thing.
Mitch, what a great opportunity for us to catch up with you. It's been too long, so let's not wait 9 months again.
Right, exactly.
All right, my friend, let's give you some BYU Sports Nation karma for life in general. Take care of that beautiful daughter and wife that you have, and we'll talk to you again soon.
I will, guys. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you soon.
You got it. Mitch Matthews on BYU Sports Nation.
Love Mitch, dude. He's great. 503 guy, man. And if you haven't, you mentioned the Deep Blue podcast. Go check it out. We explore the Hail Mary way more, like all the details around that play. Details I didn't know.
He is a fascinating individual.
Yeah.
He has read so many books. He loves knowledge and the knowledge is power notion.
Yeah.
He's gone through some significant adversity in his family life.
Oh, yeah. We talked about, like there was a couple weeks where his mom dies. He gets cut, from the NFL, and he gets married. Crazy, right?
I mean,
crazy.
Wild.
Yeah, and he was very good at BYU.
He started his own business. He's an entrepreneur star.
He slipped by that too fast.
Right?
He was very good. BYU.
Whatever.
Coming up, an elite person.
He's an elite human.
He's an elite human being, exactly. Way better than me. Coming up, 10 and 10 looks at receivers and tight ends of the opponent.
Plus, we have a contender for maybe the worst jersey ever. Something that's worse than the bibs.
Oh, yeah, it is.
This is BYU Sports Nation.
And BYU made such a difference in our lives. I think really helped mold us as to who we are. And so when we had that opportunity and came back to Boise and found out there was an active chapter, we thought, okay, that's something that I can really get behind and get involved in.
We want to promote the BYU experience all over the region. We want people who leave BYU to still stay connected.
Hi, Spencer Linton here, letting you know when your company joins the BYU team as a corporate partner, your brand can be featured in sports programming on BYU TV and BYU Radio. In addition to all of the great games, you can be part of the BYU coaches shows, place your message in Countdown to Kickoff, basketball pre- and post-game shows, and each weekday on BYU Sports Nation. We invite your team to join ours and become a corporate sponsor of BYU Athletics. For details, email sponsorship@byu.edu today.
Familiar with the BYU TV app? Yes.
I beg your pardon?
Sure, it's got great original TV shows. But it also gives you access to family films for free.
Wow. Awesome!
So gather around, grab some popcorn, and let us do the rest.
It'll be fun.
Watch some of your favorite films anytime, anywhere. With the free BYU TV app.
I like it.
This portion of BYU Sports Nation is presented by Visible Supply Chain Management.
BYU TV is sending 2 Cougar football fans, not named Colin Cowherd, to the season opener against Arizona in Las Vegas. One grand prize winner gets a trip for 2, including flight, transportation, and lodging, plus tickets to the game. 5 second-place winners will receive a BYU football fan pack and a Roku. Follow BYU TV Sports on social media for details. Winners will be selected, and random entry does not guarantee a prize. The winners will be announced on BYU Sports Nation August 20th. Today's word is Lavelle. For those who don't know how to spell Lavelle, Lavell.
Capital V. For those
That's right. Know. That's right.
Capital V.
It's very unique.
By the way, how many days until that game?
Countdown to the Wildcats.
24 days.
3.5 weeks, bro.
It's like sneaking up on us.
By the way, FanFest, Craig Ranch Regional Park in Vegas, Friday night, September 3rd, 2 hours there. We'll be live on the air for an hour of that. We're going to be hanging out. We can't wait.
Jarom's going to sign autographs. He might even let you pluck one of his hairs for a souvenir.
For hair analysis? What? I was looking into that last night. Shaylee Gonzalez posted she did that. Now she knows what foods she needs to consume.
That's pretty intense.
And not consume. I was like, what? What is
wow.
This?
Okay.
Yeah. Diegetic or
Maybe
something?
we need to have Shaylee on the show to talk about hair analysis and a little bit of basketball.
Maybe. She's on every day. She's awesome. Man.
In the meantime, let's whip it. The Cougar Whip Round presented by Visible Supply Chain Management, tackling America's most challenging shipping problems.
These Nebraska uniforms took over college football Twitter last night. Turns out they aren't real, but still, there's something. Are they better or worse than the BYU Bibs? Okay, here's Nebraska's. Red overalls. Okay. And then there's Texas A&M. These are fake, too. That are like a denim.
The one strap.
Those are so bad. Okay, and then there's the Bibs, which actually happened, and like Nike sanctioned this. Okay, here's the juxtaposition. Would that Nebraska uniform be worse than the Bibs?
Yes. When I saw the Nebraska fake uniforms, I threw up a little bit in my mouth.
Oh, you were doing like Jim Carrey and Dumb and Dumber?
Yes. It was a strong negative reaction. Those are so ugly.
And I hate this because Margin Hooks is awesome and has swag, but Margin Hooks and Rob Morris and those guys had to play in the stupid Bibs, man.
The overall look on a football uniform should be banned from even being made into a fake uniform. Okay?
So bad.
So ugly.
So bad.
The Texas A&M one is funny,
Because it's denim.
Because it's denim and
it's
it has
even got like the metal hook look.
One strap. Like that one is hilarious. Like that one evoked a laugh from me. The Nebraska one, it gave me the like so bad. I think anything can get worse than the BYU bids.
No, that's pretty bad.
Holy cow.
No offense to Farmer.
All right,
we are
Jarom, my guy, Dax Milne. He's got a rookie card.
Are you going to buy this one too?
I think I might.
Do it.
The Dax Milne rookie card is up for auction on eBay today. Starting bid, just 99 cents.
Oh.
How much would you drop for a Dax Milne rookie card?
Oh, a bushel full. Yeah, Dax is the man, dude. Autographed Dax Milne rookie card? Heck yeah.
Yes, because we will get it autographed. Just we'll get the Zach Wilson card that's on the desk autographed at some point.
There's no bids on this 99-cent card yet.
I'm going to bid right now.
Yeah, do it.
I'm literally, during the break, I'm going to bid on eBay on the Dax Milne rookie card.
And I'm going to outbid you by at least $1.
Come on. For a card like this, I think I spent...
How cheap are you?
I think I spent $8 on the Zach Wilson rookie card. So I'd absolutely go. I actually go a little bit more than that. I go $10 on a Dax Milne rookie card.
You'd spend more on a Dax Milne rookie card than a Zach Wilson one.
Dax is my guy. Dax is my guy.
And he's no one else's guy.
The most underappreciated receiver.
He's totally appreciated.
BYU history.
In BYU history?
Until last year.
Oh, okay.
Okay, then everybody got on the Dax bandwagon.
They should have.
I was telling you when he was a sophomore. Dax Milne.
BYU football posted a. You done? You good?
I'm done.
Okay.
I'm good.
I'm good. BYU football posted a tweet yesterday as an appreciation post of punter Ryan Rico and a long snapper. It was either Britton Hogan or Austin Riggs.
Great photo.
Hard to tell. So this got us thinking: what team on campus is the most underappreciated?
Oh, this is easy for me because they win the conference championship basically every year that they've been in existence.
That could be a bunch of teams.
And go to the NCAA tournament basically every year. It's women's softball.
Yeah.
Like, the expectation is just for them to show up, win conference, and go to the NCAA tournament. Like, if they don't do that, it's like, what happened?
Well, we've yet to actually make that declaration because they always make the tournament.
They always make the tournament. They always win the conference championship.
Mine's women's hoops. People I don't think understand and appreciate this team. Not only how good they are, but the personalities and skills around it. The BYU women's basketball team is fantastic. They're so good. They're so fun to watch. They have amazing people. They have a lot of skill. I'm feeling BYU can make a run. BYU lost to Arizona in the second round this year. Arizona went all the way to the title game. AKA like BYU to UCLA, and then they went to the Final Four. So BYU is like, they're like Sweet 16-ish good to me. Like, they could do that.
Yes.
I expect to win in the NCAA tournament. Honestly, with the men, we're trying to get to that point where we expect to win. Right now, it's like get to the tourney. For the women, it's they go and they win a game.
So here's the thing. In the women's basketball tournament, if you're a top 16 team, Jarom, you can host up through the Sweet 16.
And I'm not sure BYU is going to be quite that good to host, but what I'm saying is when they get in the tourney, they're dangerous.
See, I feel like they are a top 25 team. Both years that Shaylee Gonzalez has played a full season, they have gone to the tournament, they have won a tournament game, and they have pushed the number 2 seed or the higher seed to the brink in that second game. So it's
at the end of the season, being top 16 would be legit.
That would be awesome.
That'd be legit.
Okay, love this. On to the next one. Back to football. Big game boomer question of the day. The top 20 most hostile in-state rivalries, Jaron. Okay?
In-state.
In-state.
That changes things.
Okay, so not Texas, Oklahoma, not Georgia,
not
Florida.
Utah, Colorado.
Yeah. Okay. BYU Utah is number 5 on the list of most hostile in-state rivalries. Pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
BYU Utah State, number 20.
Okay.
Okay, so
interesting.
The Utes and Cougars at 5 or the Cougars and Aggies at number 20, which is more shocking?
Utah State, because I expect BYU and Utah to be, up there. And I agree. It's like the Egg Bowl, the Iron Bowl, Texas A&M. They don't even play anymore. Clemson, South Carolina, and then BYU, Utah.
Okay.
So I agree with that. I think it's top 5. Utah State surprised me a little bit. This is probably just a product of the in-state technicality.
Is this all based on just negative social media interactions?
I don't know what Big Game Boomer bases anything off of. Who knows?
And BYU Utah is just behind Clemson and South Carolina. Like, that's pretty good.
I would argue it's better than that one, actually.
Above Iowa and Iowa State.
We're talking hostile. I would say BYU Utah might be number 1 in the country. Auburn,
more than Alabama, Auburn.
No.
Ole Miss. See, the Egg Bowl is number 1. Ole Miss, Mississippi State. That one's pretty out there.
Yeah. A&M tried to prevent Texas from going to this.
That's only going to add to that one.
Yeah, a
little more hostility.
Okay, coming up, 10 and 10 features the top receivers and tight ends the Cougars will face this fall.
Where does our guy that we said is one of our favorite Utes, Britton Covey,
old man Britton Covey,
where does he land on the list of the top 10 receivers BYU will face? This is BYU Sports Nation.
Britton would be a sophomore at BYU.
They prefer to be bringing the heat, getting set for success, demonstrating their drive. But when their blood and sweat turns to tears or anything else, we lay the groundwork for BYU's athletes to hit the ground running again, and you as well. Intermountain Healthcare, official medical provider for BYU athletics.
Tim Daly Ford in Spanish Fork sells Ford vehicles including the F-150, the pickup designed for work and play. Tim Daly Ford maintains a large inventory, providing more choices for selecting an F-150 with the power and engineering to carry and tow heavy loads. The F-150's design offers comfort, safety, and a range of options to choose from. Think Ford, think Tim Daly Ford in Spanish Fork.
You don't need it. It's not a nursing home. We're all good. I can still see him. He was a good pastor.
You're not the only one who's stressed. In case you don't remember, I just left my home of 30 years.
Change is inevitable. Remember, it's okay to let go.
BYU Sports Nation is presented by the BYU Store, official outfitter of BYU fans everywhere.
After further review, Episode 2 is on demand. The players who stole the spotlight in 2020 who returned this season. Watch it on the BYU TV app and rebroadcast Saturdays at 7 a.m. Eastern Time.
Let's keep it rolling. Welcome back to BYU Sports Nation live from Studio B. I'd just like to point out that I've placed my bid for the Dax Milne rookie card on eBay. I am the first and only bidder thus far.
Well, just wait for
Good
me.
luck, everyone.
Just wait for me.
I can't wait to get this autographed edition.
I really want someone to
Dax
text
Milne
you something
card.
super weird right now. Dang it, we missed it.
All right, we move on. And it's only fitting we're talking about
What did
Dax
you bid?
Milne. What's that?
What did you bid?
Well, I bid like $1.
You bid $1.
Yes. Until
Okay.
somebody pushes it up. Let's go, right?
Well,
I'm always
looks like
searching for a bargain.
So yeah, looks like we know what to start at now. We start the bidding at $1.
Okay, on Wednesday, with wide receivers on mind, we lead up to kickoff of the football season. It's meant one thing for the last few years. That's 10 and 10s from Jarom Jordan, presented by Bodyguards, protection for a life worth living. Learn more at bodyguards.com. Jarom, today you will reveal the top 10 receivers BYU's defense will face.
10 lists in 10 weeks. It's Jarom, 10 and 10.
Let's go, homies. Number 10, R.J. Sneed, Baylor. 39 grabs for 497 yards, 3 touchdowns in 9 games last year. Second team all Big 12. Good weapon for Jeff Grimes. 6'1", 203.
Baylor's receivers, just by nature, kind of scare me.
They typically are pretty good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Super athletic, a lot of speed on the outside.
Number 9, C.T. Thomas, Boise State, 5'8", 175. Listen to these career numbers. 117 catches, 1525 yards, 10 touchdowns in 4 seasons. 17 a catch last year, 4 100-yard games. He had 2 catches for 101 yards, and both were TDs last year at Air Force.
Big-time player. Unfortunately, he's got
All-time height.
He's got to play in Provo this year, and that has not boded well for Boise State.
I heard he's short, cocky, and comes from well. That's not actually true. Travell Harris, number 8, Washington State. 5th-year senior from Tampa, 5'9", 185. Career numbers, 103. 1185 yards, 8 touchdowns in 3 seasons. In 2020, he was 7th in catches and yards in the Pac-12. He also has a kickoff return touchdown.
Normally, this type of receiver would freak me out, but and maybe this is erroneous, have a lot of confidence in BYU's speed on the outside and the ability to defend the pass in man-to-man coverage.
You're going to see more man this year. Number 7, Tyquan Thornton, Baylor. In 3 years, 81 catches, 1,294 yards, 16 yards a catch, 9 touchdowns. In 2019, 7th in yards, 3rd in yards per catch in the Big 12, 6'3", 180.
See, that's what I'm saying. You got 2 from Baylor in the top 10.
Yep.
That's scary.
Number 6, brother elder Britton Covey, Utah. In 4 years, Covey has 132 catches, nearly 1,500 yards, 8 touchdowns. Also 5.7 yards per carry as a rusher and a dangerous punt returner as well with 2 touchdowns.
Isn't he a player coach at this point?
I think he's a GA who's playing. Yeah, exactly. Number 5, Theo Howard, Utah. 3 years at UCLA, your favorite school, Spence. Then last year at Oklahoma, now Utah. Not a bad LinkedIn there. Caught a pass in 28 straight games for the Bruins. 132 catches, 1,522 yards, 9 touchdowns in his career. 6 foot 170. I don't think people are talking enough about this guy. He's pretty good.
Yeah, he's good, but he played at UCLA, so next.
So he's not good. Number 4, Renard Bell, Washington State. 147 grabs, 1,656 yards, 16 touchdowns in 4 years on the Palouse. Last season, he was top 10 in catches, yards, touchdowns in the Pac-12. 5 career 100-yard games.
Whoa. That is quite the resume. And Washington State has a couple of guys in the top 10 as well.
They're going to have a lot of passing yards, obviously, a little more than most, but...
Maybe I should worry about them as much as I worry about Baylor's receivers.
Well, they got to have a quarterback who can play.
Well, touche.
Number 3, Khalil Shakir, Boise State. Love his name. 52 catches last season in 7 games. That's a ton. 131, 1,761 yards, 13 career touchdowns. 4 rushing touchdowns, too. 6 foot 190. Had 10 catches, 139 yards, 2 touchdowns in the blowout loss to BYU last season. Remember, he kept scoring after BYU was up big.
Yes, he's an NFL receiver, no doubt. We talked to the Boise State insider, and he said without hesitation, Khalil Shakir is the best player on Boise State's team.
Number 2, Brant Keith, Utah. One of the best tight ends in the country, maybe the best. 79 yards. 79 grabs, 1,065 yards, 7 touchdowns in his career. Nearly 18 yards a catch in 2019. 6 of his 7 TDs came that year. Also 3 rushing TDs as a tight end. He's so fast they give him jet sweeps. Undersized, he's 6'2", 230, but he's like a receiver who splits out, honestly. 2-time All Pac-12 selection. Led the Utes in receptions the last 2 years. Only tight end on this list. His game is fantastic. He's a matchup problem.
So you're telling me that Utah might actually throw the ball this year if it's to Brant Keith?
Well, in 2019 they threw a lot. Tyler Huntley was like 70%.
But they don't have Tyler Huntley this year.
Yeah.
Is Charlie Brewer going to be the guy, and is he going to target Brant Keith?
Yes, on both of those. And the top receiver BYU will play this year, or tight end, Drake London, USC. 6'5", was playing basketball too, but he's all football now. Didn't play against BYU in that game in Connecticut, by the way. 15 yards per catch last season to lead the team, along with 502 yards in 6 games. Career number, 72 catches, 1,069 yards, 8 touchdowns for the junior. Top 10 in the 4 relevant categories last season in the Pac-12. NFL receiver in the future.
Yes. Just because BYU beat a USC team with 2 NFL receivers on the roster in 2019, I'm kind of like...
It might have been 3, dude. Amon-Ra St. Brown. And
Michael...
Pittman Jr.
Pittman Jr., yes.
And then they had one other. I'm pretty sure they had another.
Yeah. On that team.
Yeah, and Drake technically was on that team.
Okay,
too.
so 4.
I mean, might be more.
Maybe it's because USC is clearly going to be favored to win this game. I can't wait to watch BYU play against London and USC.
London, the receiver, not the same.
Yes.
Coming up, who among you will be granted the elite voice of the day?
And a rising shout out to clothing. Why not? This is BYU Sports Nation.
BYU Food to Go's convenient location at 2191 North Canyon Road in Provo makes bringing popular BYU foods to your next event easy. Everything's ready when you need it at the drive and load pickup. You drive in and they load no matter the weather. And stop in the on-site creamery for great BYU chocolate milk and ice cream. BYU Food to Go, bringing campus to your table. Call for details, 801-422-5001.
Quick crack. Wash all you want. Don't drive dirty.
What makes BYU TV's Super Girls of Summer so super? Their bravery, service, honesty, courage, curiosity, kindness, determination, and their desire to change the world around them. Watch the Super Girls of Summer on BYU TV and the free BYU TV app.
This is BYU football with Kalani Sitake and Greg Wrubell.
When I was younger, I was a better dancer. Don't show any more dancing. Okay, good. I think we've developed some really good habits the last couple of weeks and looking to step it up again. A lot of great things can happen when they care.
Not bad. That's good stuff.
Hey.
Yay.
Yeah, thank you for ending on that one. That was a good one.
This portion of BYU Sports Nation is presented by Mountain America Credit Union, guiding you forward.
BYU Sports Nation, always available on demand via the BYU TV and BYU radio apps.
Okay.
The bids for Dax Milne's rookie card are flying up.
You did $1 because he's your guy, and now it's up to
the bidding.
It's up to you got to go to 11.
Wow.
Yeah.
10 bids already. It's up to $10.50.
Yes. Should I bid at $10.50 for brother Yes.
I got you, Dax. Got you, bro.
I'm going a number. I'm not. Oh, I gotta go higher. What? I'm buying a new house. I can't afford this.
While Jarom does that, I remind you our question of the day, more of a challenge.
It's
of the
up
day,
to 12 now.
Was to send us your best version of you doing the Jamal Williams yearbook photo picture of the Detroit Lions. Our elite face of the day, presented by Sundance Mountain Resort.
I'm the highest bidder.
Okay, at what?
I'm not going to say I don't want to be outbid.
Our elite face of the day. Can we show this to the TV audience and try and explain it to the radio audience? Hey, it's from @Ames Flames, Amy Jones. Little Dax is his name.
Nice.
Nailed the Jamal face. I love it. There's the side-by-side with Dax and Jamal.
That's great. That's great. I am the highest bidder at the moment. I'll tell you because it will be outbid. $12.
$12?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we shot up 1,200%.
And I think there are still like 6 days left in that auction too.
Oh, dang it.
So it's got a ways to go.
That's all right.
Today's Rise and Shoutouts presented by Mountain America Credit Union, the official credit union of the BYU Cougars.
Okay, Seneca Knight for pushing a golf cart. So Seneca Knight tweets, we just had to push the golf cart up the hill because Brad Kitchen wanted to let it die, who's a GA on the staff. Brad said may or may not have been a way to find extra conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to come up the hill by the Hinckley Alumni Center.
Oh, yeah.
And it died. Welcome to BYU, Seneca.
Hey, why not give it to overalls as well on football uniforms?
Yes.
Our thanks to today's guest,
there.
Mitch Matthews.
Sorry to Dennis Pitt, who ran out of time. You would look good in overalls.
For Jarom, I'm Spencer. Shout out to Mike Solito. We'll see you on BYU Sports Nation next time. Go Cougs.
Don't outbid me.